The first thing I wanted to talk about is the language itself. I'm going to speak in English, and I wish aš norėčiau kalbėti lietuviškai, bet negalim, dar negalim. Reikia angliškai. Ir, how to say, English is a form of discourse that is particular, like all languages, I guess, but even more so since it is an hegemonic form of discourse. So it's, even if indirectly it expresses a gender, it expresses a domination of a mental space over others. And it's not my native language either. So I wanted to ask you, do you understand all English more or less? And I would like to ask you also one thing. I'm going to introduce myself, but it's impossible to know much about you in this introduction, but would you mind stating your name out loud? One time, each one of you. Would that be okay? Okay, that's great. So you can start on one end and listen to those names.
Laura.
Julia.
Cornelius.
Agnes.
Laurynas. Eimas. Vytautas. Vėjas.
Francisco is my name, my language. So, who am I? I work with sounds and images. I studied languages and literature, and I studied photography and video. My BFA studies. So I also studied film and video, and as was mentioned, I have a practice as an artist, mostly curator, a person who tries to do with the materials available things. Sometimes in collaboration with spaces, sometimes institutional spaces, some other times just any space, whatever. I'm interested in perception and in experience, and I'm interested in addressing it directly. And in a sense, my practice is about what is given, what kind of understanding emerges from the senses directly. And this is partly what I want to share with you during these 2 days. So I worked in Portugal. My first part of my work was developed in Portugal, and then I had a total of 5-year experience in the United States, where I developed another body of work, and I will not spend a long time in that more conventional form of presentation where you kind of, but I will show you some of my works from those times, little bits, excerpts, and we'll pause when it's enough. I would just say that each place that I've lived in directly influences the work that I do, and the work is always an intersection of things that I'm thinking about and things that emerge from the place I live in. And so you will see those material changes directly affecting the work. So, we should talk throughout all of our encounter, but today I will show some things about my work, talk for a little bit, and show a few examples. I would ask you to ask as many questions as you want, and if you can, save the questions for after I'm finished talking. You will see that it's more efficient that way. I would like to also already invite you tomorrow to come with me on a walk. We can meet here at the scheduled time and we'll do together an exercise. I thought initially to make some work with you on site, but we don't have enough time for that, so I thought of something else. So it will be a simple exercise that I will, tomorrow I'll describe it to you, but it has to do with perception and with topography and most above all with acknowledging our immediate surroundings, with trying to establish a relationship with each other and the surroundings. The ideal time of day would be dusk. I'll explain why, because it's with light and darkness corresponds to gradients of attention, and especially when it concerns listening. But it will be fine too. It will be middle of the day, so bring some water if you come, and and we'll try to have a good time and not take too long so that we can have lunch. Yeah, so let's say I'll just go through some of these things I'll just describe. This is a project I did in Lisbon for a park, which was partly a planned project and partly something enacted. It was a series of outdoor installations using sound and space and mirrors. So they were not performative themselves, but they invited observers to experience the space in a participatory way. This is not very clear in the image, but it's a series of 3 places where sound installations were programmed. I ended up showing the work as a binaural path in a show to be listened to. This is a piece I did for a group show, of which I wanted to play a little bit the next is what I'll explain first. Yeah, so what it was it was a group show with a lot of artworks, sculptures, paintings, usually site-specific works, mostly art-specific works, but it was made in an old fortress in the south of Portugal, and so I installed a device with fishing lines on the roof, which you couldn't see, but what you could hear, what you could listen inside, was the movement of the wind on the fishing lines. Yeah, the sound of the wind on the fishing lines spread through the building. So let's say that it was a connection between the landscape and the interior space, and that my aim was to have the material space outside the building directly affect your experience inside of it. a work that I made, it's a longer project in a natural reserve in Portugal, in the mountains. And it had two main locations. One is an area where I camped, and then other locations spread throughout the main plateau. It's a glacier landscape, and I organized the work in the fields around the landscape. So I did different kinds of work. I did video recordings by the place where I went to sleep, and video recordings in the barren, naked landscape on the plateau, while recording sounds and the sounds of wind on strings. I organized the material according to the presentation space, so according to the gallery mapping. I did a double projection, so two films that I played at the same time. This is one of them, and this is another one. And then a film recorder adjacent to the place, which records a real-time progression of sunlight, sunrise it is. So it's a little bit like a clock. I thought of maybe playing you a little bit of this with 3 screens, but it's not the best way to see it, and the quality is not excellent, so it's possible that we do it at some other time. In this project, I explored a different part of Portugal. It's a desertified part of Portugal. I was interested in specifically in how the habit of walking has decreased in the last decades, really, extensively in the interior part of the country. And we were at an artist residency, at a place like this, a bit like this, but longer. And so my decision was to follow a river that passed by until I would find the spring. So in this case it was a 3-day walk, about 60 kilometers. And it was interesting to do because I met people and I saw a lot of the landscape. The work was composed of a film I made when I reached the spring of the river, which is a static shot of that tree, and of projection of photographs that I made whenever I stopped to rest. And I showed it in a house of one of the shepherds of the village. So it has a part in the house where you keep the sheep, which you used to take on walks through the mountains during the day. That's it. So a little bit after this, I did a longer project in New York, which is also based on a walk, in which I mapped 2 locations and sort of connected them by walking. And the location on the top of the island is the place where the last native people of the island of Manhattan lived. By the end, they were living in a place that was a little bit like almost like a display area for the white people to come and see how they lived. So I filmed the entrance of this cave, and I did a series of photographs that were shown together. This is a show I created in Lisbon called Labyrinth. It's a group show. Those are the names of the artists. It's barely legible. And maybe I show you a bit about this. It's a binaural recording of the space. But the show was based on the city of Lisbon, and I asked people to create pieces that either referred to their experience of the city directly or were inspired by the city, and we installed the works in this apartment, 19th century apartment building, which is nowadays an artist's museum. So it's an artist-run building, but it's quite a big space. And basically we just left openings of light from the city and installed pieces in different rooms. Sounds you hear are from sound equipment. The space was unrestricted so that people could create a mix by themselves while walking. In this case, we're walking with a microphone, basically. This is a collaborative piece, also from New York. This is another one from the West Coast. Freeway is a group of works that include performance works, installation, and even public posters that were placed in public spaces. And found objects, animation, audio performance, and maybe I'll show you this one piece that is sort of part of that. So, a lot more passed, and there are other things that I've done, but maybe I would just fast forward, not to spend too much time on this part of the talk. Just showing you a little bit of what I'm working on here in Lithuania. Yeah, so I'll just do that. I'll show you a few minutes of the film that I'm making in Lithuania, and then we can talk about the other things. I can tell you more about the film. It's also yeah, we can talk about the film at some other time. Okay, so the title of my talk is Experiencing Work. And there is, of course, a double meaning to the expression experiencing work. I want to talk about experiencing works of art and the experience of physical work. In the way in which they, the experience of a work of art and the experience of physical work both concern energy and have to do with gradients of intensity. So yeah, I'm going to fast forward to that, and please ask me any questions when considering single-channel duration works in contemporary media practice, the formal terms offered by the works in themselves constitute the most reliable coordinates for establishing modes of reception and understanding the content. It is still the encounter of one's body and the senses with such works of art that constitutes the event. Therein lies the truth value of any ensuing relationship of varying length and depth between you and the work. Nevertheless, one still often relies on the pervasive cognitive categories of narrative and continuity. These are still, nowadays more than ever, the hegemonic cognitive figures deployed by the spectacle in ultimate support of normative forms of understanding. Today I'd like to focus our attention on experience-based forms of understanding, specifically in the relation generated by media itself directly in works of art and their presentation. Physical work will not be addressed directly. It is subsumed in the affect relation between the artist and their contingent materials, and in the understanding generated by that encounter. With no time in this talk for an in-depth and broad approach to the issue and related problems, I will instead propose a few ideas and fragments as coordinates for subsequent interactions with you. So, narrative and continuity are important categories in mainstream cinema. Hollywood and American filmmaking in general is often referred to simply as continuity cinema. There are reasons for this denomination deeper than the set of technical rules that it denotes. Continuity stands also for perceptual homogeneity, or the convenient smoothing out of what we can call anomaly. This is to say that in continuity there is an injunction to trust, namely in the action image as it appears in itself, and exactly as engendered by montage. Anomalies of all kinds still exist, of course, sometimes ostensibly so, but they're restricted to the surface of the film, its set of operations and definite functions. Within continuity, the viewer has little participation beyond the detection of the programs and the reflecting of experiences without the body. Nowhere beyond the passive reception of narrative rewards. I've chosen to approach narrative today as a cognitive category because it is not storytelling itself, with its long history, rules, and atavisms that I work against, but rather this overstimulated narrative impulse in ourselves as spectators. Also and especially because I want to address perception in itself as complementary to narrative. As Merleau-Ponty has shown in his phenomenology of perception, when detailing attention and judgment, mere attention precedes even the higher order of interpretation of content as a viable site of cognitive resistance. René D'Aristany, like a speculative realist, in his seminal text Contingency and Complicity, notes that an artist that is an accomplice of material reality is an artist that enacts a mode of complicity with contingency, which is to be taken here as the most generic procedure in nature. Contingency, he says, is the concomitant occurrence of possibilities. It happens in spite of possibilities. It is also the possibility that nothing might happen. The artist does this by abandoning expectations towards her relation to the content, while experiencing it directly, in a particular mode that I hope I will have contributed to clarify during today's talk and tomorrow's walk and exercise. Some of what I want to share may be stated in terms of a critique of conventional continuity. I am more interested in experience, in highlighting the deeper categories of sameness and permanence directly through the senses, in repositioning the feeling of trust from the montage to the viewer herself along with her body. The use of the word trust here, I use it not as a figure of consent, but as a matter-of-fact quality of sensorial input. Visual and oral recognition and affect configure a definite, instantaneous worldview before us all, at all times. The sheer identification of objects and their relationships depend on a feeling of trust, which does not need more than our presence in the world through attention in order to emerge. This is an example of the musical work of the New York-based minimalist composer Phil Block. It's rooted in a simple but sound working process that has seldom changed over the years. He creates several recordings of an instrument playing one individual note. Each time, the note pitch is slightly bent. The full composition consists of a very large group of these recordings played simultaneously. Each composition is quite long, and they are meant to be played at extremely loud volumes. Sometimes the note being played by the instruments will change in the middle of the piece. As for the individual expression of the musician in each of the recordings, it rarely comes to influence the modulations heard in the final composition. This is because Block aims for the musician's performance to be as neutral as possible, favoring the advent of a physical phenomenon, that is, the interference of slightly different tones generating new ones, so-called overtones. Interference is a well-known physical phenomenon, as we've seen in yesterday's lecture on the double slit experiment. That experiment, opened the way to the realization of the mystery of the relation between matter and energy. Occurring in any type of wave-particle dualities, this realization has brought physicists to venture into purely theoretical machinations of what might or might be true. Reality in sum is now everyone's and no one's. It's all up to us to think by ourselves about truth and accordingly. I want to tell a story. One afternoon, Block realized while riding in the back of a truck that was climbing the mountains in Peru, behind another truck similar to it climbing ahead, while looking at the clouds in the sky between and from the back of the pickup truck. He learned through his senses, and by them, that the world is ridden with its fields. That all relationships are essence itself, and that all objects are real only for an observer. When the sound of the two truck engines coexisted for Niblock in perception, the event was real for him, and he decided what he wanted to do with film and music. To find a material form for that very truth, on objects and bodies in existence, directly in perception. To that effect, he decided to replicate for a listener the overtone structures that he was hearing when the motors emanated together while climbing the hill. There have been a number of scientific and musical studies on overtones, but Niblock is only mildly aroused by the physics. His compositions have a geometrical simplicity, and they want to aim at something true. New York City is a complex and multiple setting, and his work, which is made there carefully, often in semi-dark rooms, abstracting the memories from the field, proposes a reflection on sameness and difference, the body of us, the whole and the parts. The perception of overtones in Niblock's music is not an evident one, nor is it solid. It is rather of a more lateral kind, like a faintness of its own, or like a ghost. Our attention may bring us the unchanging elements in the piece, which are the ones given at the center of attention, the notes that are actually played by the instruments. But the overtones are only there laterally. They exist for the observer as a possibility given to perception directly, as a small perception. These subtle phantom sounds, which arise from the plurality and liminal difference of a number of individual sounds, represent the phantom presence of as yet untitled multiples, an apparition of totality that depends on every individual one in order to come into existence. Speaks of truth emanating from an unfathomable perception. Multitude of people for which New York itself is a common metaphor. His music and artistic drive expresses that perception. Ultimately, it also stresses the importance of perceptions on the threshold of difference. In apparent naked sameness, truth is latent at the brink of attention. Between 1973 and the early 90s, Niblock developed the movement of people working. It's a series of films depicting bodily processes of non-industrialized labor. concentrate on the movement and actions of human hands while encompassing bodies, objects, and the exchanges. It is his most consistent and long filming project, comprising long hours of 16mm and later video as well. It is frequently used as a visual accompaniment to his live music performances. It's an expression of Nibok's musical vision through what he properly calls performance images. From Peru and Mexico to China, Japan, Indonesia, Hungary, Romania, or even Portugal, a context where his films hold the best ethnographic record of fishermen throughout the Portuguese coast during the momentous 1970s. This project focuses on the tactile details of labor methods in depicted countries and are almost entirely composed of close-ups, as you can see. Dedicates attention to the laborers within the frame, explicitly avoiding the questions concerning anthropology and sociology directly. I will further argue that it is the perceptual imprint generated by the sound of his music together with the image that involves the viewer in a direct way with the work, in that double sense of the word. So let's look at it. Despite the apparent contrast between the two dimensions of labor, there is a deep but unfathomable correspondence between the succession of these bright, fragmented images and the illusory continuity of Nibok's aural radiance. As if the slow, minute gestures of hands and torsos that weave and thresh find an unexpected double in the tactile and intricate movement of the musician's organs. I have another example that I'd like to show you. It's by Lucien Castaing-Taylor. I'll briefly introduce him, saying that academically he's responsible in the social anthropology department at Harvard for creating the media anthropology department, and specifically the sensory ethnography lab. And I'm going to play you a little bit of his latest film called Leviathan. see the birds? Is it possible to see? So Lucien Castain-Taylor's example, I give it in this context because of the operation of the camera specifically. It's like a satellite of the mind, a cognitive satellite in the era of direct perception. It's a detachment from the work that is depicted, in this case of fishermen, but nevertheless states the following on contingency and complicity. That there is what Negaristani calls a gradient of humiliation experienced by the artist as he loses control over his mode of openness to contingency. He calls the resulting effect closure. Leviathan is a work with fishermen, but of a very different kind of the one we saw before in Filmy Block's films. Beyond the technical differences, however, the two works share a devoted dedication to attention, expressed in duration and in the multitude of details available, and on the refusal of narrative and conventional continuity. Castain-Taylor makes the camera traverse quite explicitly that border that separates the body from the plane of all other objects, while remaining at the service of the artist's perception rather than cognition, trusting perception to resolve understanding and bring out through attention the anomalies that initiate true cognitions. There is a creative abdication at play here in the conventional sense of creativity, a loss of oneself, that permits that the penetration of the materials into the work of their own accord. Material reality is first understood as a whole, together with the artist, and only afterwards does he abdicate from his control over the camera. The result is a mediated expression of material reality itself. We see the free flow of objects, animals, people, and they're all equal in their relation to another. This is a material cinema. So I'll conclude these ideas by saying that acknowledging and rendering meaning from images and sounds in works of art is no different than other processes that we may acknowledge very well on our own. Simply, while experiencing life, we have before us a mysterious process that takes place directly in our attention and in our body. It happens before any judgment and interpretation take over. In the terms of Alain Badiou, we are in the realm of the event while experiencing in this way. The truth procedure matters to us as opposed to knowledge, which is the law of situations. And that includes the conditions of creation and receptions of works of art. So thank you for your time. If you have any questions, go ahead. Otherwise, thank you for your time.
Yeah.
Could you please comment on the film you are making now, or would you advise us to wait for the papers?
No, yeah, with pleasure. So it's, yeah, I've been working for a while on and off. I mean, consistently, but whenever I'm in Lithuania with a couple of people who, about 7 years ago, decided to live in a way in which they create most of the material conditions of their life. So they built a house with their own hands. They built a ceramic kiln where they make ceramics. They live with animals. And they build structures in a place that they call their garden. So I'm documenting the way in which structures, objects, and relations between them with people and with other beings kind of exists. Let's think objects, for example. The objects in this place, they express a lot an idea of use value as opposed to exchange value. Let's say that the things that they have there, they have either been repurposed or made for a purpose by themselves. And the idea of their monetary value is almost absent from the place. So that's one thing that interests me. Another thing is the de facto relation, coincidence of art and life in their situation. So I'm making a piece that will be shown, it will be unfolded in space. So it will be shown as a sound piece for space with more than one screen that aims to create a situation of signifiers from this place, of images, of sounds, a space where you can experience a little bit how they live. There will be also a single channel work, so a film that you can look at as well. So I'm working parallel on those two things. Yeah, what else can I tell you? They have an interesting story, and there's a lot of, in that text that I said that it's possible to access online, where I describe my relationship with them, a bit of their history and our working process. You can read more about it, but in the work I'm not as interested in providing information as I am in creating an experience.